go.
Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another episode of Ask Anything, brought to you by Moser Consulting. I'm your host, Angel Leon, Moser's Director of Personnel. We're glad that you're with us for this episode of Ask Anything because today we're going to be talking about recent updates to Snowflake, a platform that is a cloud-based data warehousing service that allows organizations to store, manage, and analyze large amounts of data. With us to discuss these updates is Alex Payne, one of Moser Consulting's own consultants. Alex Payne is a 23-year-old professional from Indianapolis. He graduated from Purdue University with a degree in applied statistics. Alex interned at Moser in the summer of 2023 and joined the company full-time in January 2024. Currently, he works in data engineering, specializing in data migrations, Power Apps, Streamlit Development, and Snowflake Data Management. Alex is also a leader of the AI-Tig, where he presents monthly on cutting-edge AI technology. Outside of work, he enjoys playing and watching sports as well as working out. Alex, it's great to have you with us on Ask Anything as we once again dive a little bit deeper into one of our favorite topics, AI, and this time it's Snowflake. I understand they've made some progress in this arena, but before we get to that, let's welcome our guest, Alex Payne. Alex, how are you?
Pretty good. How are you? Thanks for having me today.
I'm doing great. I read, of course, that you came from Purdue. I am terribly sorry about the loss this weekend, Purdue football.
Yeah. Hey,
It's
you
been
got
a
the coach
rough
fired, so
season. Yeah. Yeah, sorry. Yeah, it's rough. But anyway, let's get to the topic at hand, which is Snowflake and its current updates to its AI capabilities. So, Alex, how can you define what Snowflake is to our listeners? I kind of gave them a brief overview of what it is, but in your own words, what can you tell us about Snowflake?
kind of like you said, Snowflake is a cloud-based data platform designed for data warehousing, big data analytics, data sharing. Can provide a unified platform to consolidate all different types of data. So you got structured, semi-structured, and unstructured, which makes it accessible and manageable in one place. But I think what really separates Snowflake is its architecture, which separates storage and compute, which allows users to scale resources independently. So, for example, if you've got a lot of data, but you're not running a lot of processes or jobs on it, you can pay for that extra storage, but you're not going to be charged for that computing power. And on the other hand, if you're running a lot of jobs, but on a not a lot of data, you can use your warehouses to charge you for compute, but not have to pay for that extra storage. So Snowflake really allows you to be flexible with how you want to manage and transform your data. I've heard it kind of described as a Swiss Army knife, which I think is a pretty good analogy for it. So that's how I would best describe Snowflake.
Yeah, I think I agree. From everything that you mentioned, that does sound like a Swiss Army knife. Let's shift into the AI capabilities of Snowflake because I believe some of those fall under Snowflake's Cortex. What can you tell us about that?
Yeah, so Cortex is actually relatively new. For those who don't know, Snowflake puts out updates like weekly at least, and sometimes there's even multiple per week. So sometimes it's kind of hard to keep up with all their new technology. But Snowflake Cortex is an advanced AI and analytics service built directly on top of Snowflake's platform. I believe there's 27 different large language models or
Oh,
LLMs
wow.
that Cortex has as a possibility. They are different variations of the same 4 to 5 models. So 27 is a little bit larger than it may actually be, but there are 27 variations that you can apply to your processes for different reasons. But as far as Cortex, there's two main services involved with Snowflake Cortex. The first being Cortex AI Search, and the second being Cortex AI Analytics. Cortex AI Search is the simpler of the two and the cheaper of the two, and it's mostly designed for point lookup queries. So, for example, let's say you've got a huge data set of healthcare data, and you're trying to find one particular patient, and you don't want to take the time to write a ton of different SQL queries to find that particular patient. You can use Snowflake Cortex and just type in a sentence, okay, go ahead and pull all the information for Alex, and it'll take your text and convert it to an SQL query and then actually execute that query for you and return that result set for you to then analyze or do whatever you need to do with that data. Now, Cortex AI Analytics is similar in that it will still convert your text to SQL, but it's a lot more powerful. And the reason for that is because it uses what's called a semantic model. So it can recognize your intent with your text. So an example I like to provide for recognizing intent is, let's say that I'm analyzing, business data, and I ask, okay, who is the best salesman? A non-semantic model might be like, okay, like, what do you mean by best? Whereas a semantic model is going to be like, okay, there's a column in this data set that says like total sales or, sales made. And it's going to interpret that the best salesman is the one that made the most sales, right? So it's going to pull. The cool part about semantic models is it can kind of take your words and then discover your intent as well, instead of just, literally taking like the best word and looking for a column that says best, right? So that's one of the powerful things about Cortex analytics. And then the other is that the actual text to SQL is a lot more powerful as well. So Cortex analytics can do, complex joins. You can pull data from multiple tables or views. You can add some pretty extensive filtering. You can do some aggregates. So it's a lot more powerful if you want a more comprehensive result set instead of just, a point lookup query. But it is more expensive, right? So if you're just looking for a point lookup query, I would just use Cortex Search. But if you want something a little bit deeper, it may be best to use Cortex Analytics, which does, like I said, use more warehousing time. So there's a little give and take there.
So those are the differences between the two.
Right.
And it's interesting that, so I'm assuming that I'm going to call it Cortex Pro. The Pro version of it basically can do some of the simplistic items that you mentioned from the Cortex Search, right?
Yeah.
But just kind of take that to the next level and interpret your own words a little bit deeper, give it a little bit more deeper meaning.
Exactly. It can also create various charts for you, which is pretty neat. So some of the visualizations you see in Power BI, not quite to the level of Power BI yet, but it can create, some of the more simpler visualizations you'll see there. So you can analyze your data in real time. So like I've done bar charts and line charts and scatter plots. So three simple kinds of visualizations it can generate automatically for you from the query that you ask it. So that's another neat part about Cortex Analyst.
So if it generates those charts, and you can then get that to like Power BI, say, for example, and start maybe then expanding it a little bit more there.
Right, exactly. So you can pull that result set into Power BI and then go even further.
Sounds very neat. So let's talk about cases for it. Can you give us some examples of use cases for it?
Right. So I talked about the healthcare insights. Another one that I like to talk about is for fraud detection. So financial institutions can use Cortex to flag anomalies in transactions. So you can use it to kind of grab pieces of data that might meet a certain condition that indicate some sort of fraud, which is interesting. Retailers can use Cortex to analyze like purchasing patterns and predict customer needs for like a marketing strategy, right? So if they notice that a customer is purchasing, a certain product at a certain time, they can use Cortex analysts to gather the impact of that, which is interesting. And finally, like manufacturing companies can use or can analyze sensor data that can predict equipment failures and help schedule repairs or necessary maintenance. So it's really a quick way to be able to access and analyze your data without having to really know code, which is nice. Not everyone's going to be able to know the code, exactly when they need to get the answers from the code. So that's a really awesome part about it.
As you were speaking, I was thinking, because I couldn't help but tie the two together. We're recording this on Cyber Monday, so shout out to anybody who's listening to this and probably buying stuff online. But I'm thinking about the use case for like a small business, for example. Maybe not necessarily the smallest of small business, but some place that maybe has a couple shops that could use this tool, like you mentioned. I mean, they can use this tool to see, hey, Angel bought a bar of soap from X brand on this day. It has been a couple of weeks. That item brought 4 different bars of soap. So maybe he's about to run out. What about if can they use this to maybe target me as a potential buyer of other similar items, and then send me an email, for example, and say, hey, Angel, we thought you might be interested in this. And maybe it's been now 3-4 weeks since I bought that bar of soap, and now maybe I'm about to run out. So they're now targeting my running out date. And so I think that would be a very good marketing strategy really quickly, and maybe, bring back some customers.
Yeah, just the efficiency that this can allow for in the turnaround
Yeah.
from getting your data to actually using your data is really helpful.
I can't help but think about that. Just the applications that you can use that on from any standpoint as a business, as a small business, medium, I mean, even large business, I'm sure that they do this to some forward degree where, I mean, I see it every day in my email. It's like, hey, come back and look at this cruise that you were looking at 4 weeks ago. Like, why don't you go ahead and take a cruise? And it's kind of, I'm assuming it's kind of using the same algorithm and things of that nature, but it's really interesting to see things like this and how it can be applied to, say, a small business, etc.
Right. It's funny how you said like you're getting emails based off, some sort of data that was recorded about you, because I imagine they probably integrated some sort of data pulling mechanism with some sort of trigger that if it gets some sort of piece of information from a data set, then it'll send an email
Yeah,
out, right? So you can automate some of these processes with, Cortex could pull a result set, and if some certain condition is met for a customer, it automates an email to them. So just keep speeding up your marketing and your business strategy.
right. Just making it more efficient and really better overall. I mean, rather than just cold calling or cold emailing people right out of the blue. So
Right.
that's interesting. So let's move on now and kind of discuss any type of comparison to other AI tools that might be out there between Snowflake, Cortex.
Yeah, I think the biggest thing that stands out for Cortex for me is because it operates directly in Snowflake, so it can immediately access all of your data. Whereas some of these other models like Google AI or Azure, OpenAI, they would require a data migration to be able to access Snowflake data, right? Because it's
Interesting.
not it's not accessible directly like it is to Cortex. So you'd have to go through the process of migrating all of your data or passing all of your data to a different LLM. And an issue that I ran into this because I tried to do this before Cortex was a thing was when you try to migrate and pass all of your data directly to an AI service that's external, you run into what's called the token limit pretty quickly, which basically means that you're giving the AI model too much information at once that it can't handle. And so you have to keep splitting up your result sets, which just makes it completely inefficient because if I have 100,000 row table and I have to split it 100 times, it's really frustrating for a developer and for those trying to get insights that they have to wait for this model to iterate over 100 different pieces of information before I can get an answer. Whereas Cortex can just look through your entire database and access the information it needs and gather the information it needs pretty close to immediately. So that's the biggest thing that I can say really stands out about Cortex in comparison to other models.
Yeah, from a migration standpoint, that's definitely much more efficient than just
Right.
having to wait for everything to kind of just take on the data that you have. So, how does Snowflake Cortex make AI accessible to users with varying levels of technical expertise?
So what I think is really nice about Snowflake Cortex is that you can access it in pre-built workflows. And also Snowflake does these things called quick starts, which is basically just a tutorial on how to set up some of their new tech in possibly the simplest way that you can. So they'll actually give you like 5 or 6 steps of how to run the code and set up the code. And you won't have to do any customization on your own because they'll provide, detailed steps on how to do it. And then you can test out, on a sample database or something that you're not able to break if you're not very confident in what you're doing in a database. So you can still be able to see and use the technology without having any risk there. But at the same time, Snowflake has what's called Streamlit, which is kind of an app interface that's built using Python, but can be directly used within Snowflake. And some more experienced developers can use Python programming to, create custom apps where I've done this for a couple of sales events, but you can create custom apps where you have users able to interact with, Cortex on a sales database or their specific data and pull information from it for whatever reason. And you can integrate it into a website or, like I said, an app. And it allows you to be able to take whatever skills you have, learn the new technology in an environment that's best suited for you. So I think like the dual approach really ensures that, data analysts and data scientists can all use Cortex effectively, aligning with their skill sets.
And that's very neat because that brings capability to maybe some of us who are not necessarily as technically savvy as folks like you who've studied the material and know exactly what they're talking about. But maybe if I were to take a stab at it, maybe I have a little bit less experience, so it's still something that I can make happen and I can actually manipulate a little bit to some degree.
Right. And one of the good things is there are some like guardrails involved. So there are queries that are limited, right? It's not going to go and like delete your entire database, even if you tell it to. Like
I hope not.
Snowflake has installed some like preventions from like for destruction. Basically, you can't go and update a field to erase or change the value involved. So that's another way that they've kind of catered to people who may not be 100% confident that and also just to safeguard against the model, right? Like while the semantic models are pretty accurate, I think I
Yeah,
saw a study that it's 91% accurate, which is pretty solid in
it's pretty.
comparison to ChatGPT and Claude and Gemini and these other models as far as text to SQL. But they still can be prone to mistakes. So it's nice that Snowflake has those guardrails. So in case the model makes a mistake, you're not like destroying a production database, which could cause more problems than Cortex can fix, right? So I think that's another good thing that they do to help out people.
Yeah, just a way to build in those guardrails. That's very good. All right. So before we go, from what you've seen from Snowflake, how does Snowflake plan to continue evolving its AI capabilities to meet the growing need of its users?
I think they're gonna really continue to integrate advanced features such as real-time streaming data analysis. So they're going to get better at being able to analyze data immediately after it comes in. I think they're also planning to expand their partnerships with other AI vendors to continually improve their models and get that 91% up even higher. Additionally, I believe they are going to increase the token limit for some of their models. So I mentioned the token limit. It was an issue with some of the external models. It is still a problem within some of the 27 AI models that Snowflake has, not so much with the Cortex Search and the Cortex Analyst, but some of the 27 do have token limits that I know Snowflake is still trying to expand upon so you can pass larger amounts of data and get larger responses. But the great thing about Snowflake is these updates come very quickly. For example, I started working with Cortex about 2 or 3 months ago, and then there's been like 2 or 3 updates since I started working with it. So they just added the join capability actually a few weeks ago that I've been working on for a client now, because that's something that they were looking to have before implementing it into their production database. So I think they're just the quick turnaround that Snowflake has. They take feedback from their users. They're always asking for information from partners and then turning that into usable, production resources is awesome. And I'm excited to see they continue to make updates. So
Yeah, it sounds like the future is coming along nicely for Snowflake Cortex, and it's always good to know that you have that support right immediately, or that at least you have some updates in the background coming in to a fast-paced degree instead of just waiting months upon months on getting those updates from the developers. So it's good to know that you have that in the back of your pocket.
right. Yeah, because that's the frustrating thing, especially in consulting when you're backlogged by, technology limitations and you're not going to get a change for 6 months and then eventually you move on to other stuff or you kind of forget your train of thought and you kind of
Right.
go a different path and you stop your process, right? Whereas Snowflake, if they put out a new update that helps this in 3 weeks, then I can come right back to it seamlessly and implement it.
Yeah. Again, positive all the way around it. I'm assuming that they take the feedback from folks like you very seriously when it comes to the usage and what you'd like to see maybe on future iterations.
Yeah, exactly. Especially when, partners are spending a good amount of money to pay for their warehousing and their storage, right? They want to make sure that
Right.
we have the necessary resources to do what we want to do.
And with that, Alex, it's been a pleasure to have you on Ask Anything. Thank you so much for joining us to talk about Snowflake Cortex. If you'd like to learn more about Snowflake or Alex, please visit our website, moserit.com, where you find more information about data analytics and all of our capabilities. Alex, thanks again.
Thank you.
Thank you for listening in to this week's edition of Ask Anything presented by Moser Consulting. We hope you enjoyed listening to Alex Payne talk to us about Snowflake and its latest developments in the AI space. Be sure to join us next time where we continue to dive deeper with our resident experts and what they're currently working on. Remember to share your ideas or topics with us on our social media channels. In the meantime, please remember to give us a rating and subscribe to our feed wherever you get your podcasts. Until then, so long, everybody.